Okay, raise your hand if you're working on the novel. Like, this has been your brain baby for at least a couple of years now. You catch yourself fantasizing about your eccentric characters, emotionally impactful scenes, a badass action sequence, maybe a wild romance, the craziest magic system. Like, this book lives rent-free in your head. Well, stop it. Stop it now. Alright, the title of this video is a little bit exaggerated, thank you for clicking, but the sentiment still remains the same, and I have very strong opinions about it, which comes in 4 stages. There are some dangers I noticed over the course of my writing journey that come with having the entirety of your writing revolve around your novel. This quintessential perfect book that exists in your head, and every time you put words on the page, it is for the sole purpose of getting that book on paper. Might sound a little bit dramatic, but I do believe it can be detrimental to your writing as a whole. Though I want to preface this by saying, depending on the type of writer you are, this might not apply to you. Or it might, I don't know, stick around and find out. But that brings me to part 1 of 4. Not everything is for the written novel. At least in my opinion, it shouldn't be. When you have your novel on such a pedestal that everything you put to page is for it, I think it's a great way to stagnate your writing real quick. You need writing that isn't going to end up in your novel and writing that isn't for your novel, full stop. There is a difference between the two. The first, when I say writing that isn't going to end up in your novel, I'm talking about writing that still kind of revolves around it. I'll write a dialogue between 2 characters just to get a better sense of their voice, backstory scenes I know won't end up in the final draft, a fight sequence that lets me understand the flow of the magic system. It helps you flesh out the world even more, and I think it's a huge part of writing the type of books that feel like they live beyond the page. But it also puts you in the mindset of selecting things that will and will not end up in your novel, which can make your story that much tighter. The second of the two, though, I think is more important. Writing things that aren't for your novel, full stop. I personally have neglected this one for a while now, and I think what sparked it up again was me getting back into doing art more religiously. Dude, I think more writers need to get comfortable with the idea of a writing sketchbook, a scribble book if you will. And I know some of you might be completely adverse to the idea. You know, it's like you probably only get so much time to write and you don't want to waste it on something that isn't your novel. I get it. That's kind of the point of this video, and you're already learning that way, so why bother? But practice that is just for practice sake is so paramount to growth, and I can't stress that enough. Some writers do it in the form of short stories, but even that, you can have it in the back of your mind that you'll send it to a cheeky little lip mag after you're done. But it can be really helpful just writing whatever without any expectations. And I've forgotten that in recent times, how freeing, how educational it can be. Plus, it doesn't have to be a slog either. You can make it really fun. I remember I used to write on movie scenes in a prose format. I haven't done that in a while, and I kind of miss it. Same way I do a quick dialogue prompt before I started my writing for the day. Think of fun ways you can do little practice sessions. Again, to make it analogous, it's like learning the art fundamentals. Walk yourself through an old room and write down descriptions. Do a little fanfic scene. Write a different POV to a scene that you just read. There are infinite number of ways you can go about this. But this brings me to part 2 of 4. Do you know how to juggle? Because I sure as fuck don't. But it starts with one ball, right? That comes with natural dexterity and that coordination. And then you add another, and it gets progressively harder with each one. But the same goes for your writing. Start learning how to juggle different projects. Listen to me close. Not every writer is going to have that bandwidth for multiple, completely separate projects at once. They just cannot accommodate that into the process. It's not something they find fun. It's distracting. Whatever reason they have, I say it's valid. So don't stress yourself out. This is just a suggestion, as is this entire video. But I'd say that most can. It just takes a little management. It's not going to be easy. It's a muscle you build, and like building muscle, it doesn't get easier, you just get better. But the way I like to do it is I'm in multiple stages of different projects. So I'm editing one while drafting another, outlining one more, maybe world building another after that. It's a lot less got my shit together than it sounds, trust me, but I do think it's better than the alternative of just sticking to one piece, and for very specific reasons. One is that it increases the rate at which you learn. You get to practice different parts of the process much faster if you're juggling multiple pieces. You don't have to wait until you're done drafting something before you start editing, because you're already editing the one before. If you're world building a piece, you could be refining your outlining process with another. Gaining that experience happens a lot slower if you're just focused on crafting your masterpiece, the one novel to rule them all. And the thing is, the knowledge you get can interplay. What you learn while editing could be applied the very next day to the other piece you're drafting. It just creates the storm of exponential progress. Second is that it keeps writing fresh. I'd say it's about 50-60 60% of the time I know what project I'm actually going to work on when I sit down to write, and that's usually the main piece I'm drafting in the moment. The other 40% of the time, it's a toss-up between my other projects, which again are in different stages, and I usually have at least one other. Simply, it just makes writing that much more fun, and when I'm stuck on one, I can go to the other, though I always try to prioritize the drafting piece. The third thing, and in my opinion the lesser of the three, is that if you're trying to become a pro, it's a good mindset to put yourself in. Even if it's only semi-pro, and semi-pro in the sense that this is going to be a significant part of your income necessary to put a roof over your head, you're going to be expected to put out a book every like 1 to 2 years, 3 if you're really pushing it, and that's if your book do decently enough. Full disclaimer though, that's me pulling a number out of my ass just off my general knowledge of the industry. Honestly, it's probably smaller, but if you're a fast writer, you don't care about parallel projects. Writing is subjective. Don't ever forget it. But it kind of leads into the next and third part, which is mileage. A little catchphrase I like to do is write, and then write some more. But let's do some quick math. So you know that saying that's like 10,000 hours to become an expert at something? I'd say the average writer writes around 500 words an hour. That's 5 million words to become a pro. Assuming the average book is around 80K, that's over 60 books. That is insane. Now, those are arbitrary figures. Art is never a competition. You're not racing anywhere. People learn at different rates, and good practice can significantly reduce that number. But chances are, still millions of words to get really freaking good at writing. Specifically in the context of this video though, you need to de-glorify your novel. You're gonna look back in a year or two and be like, damn, I really thought this was all that, huh? I had this piece I was adamant I'd already have published by now. I look back at it and I cringe. Now, not to say that your novel shouldn't be special to you. Anybody actually saying that with malice needs to get stumped out with Doc Martens. And what I'm also not trying to do is get you into this perpetual state of I'm not good enough. But while you can fall absolutely in love with your novel and have all those fantasies about your characters and worlds like I mentioned at the beginning, you still need to understand that that is all for the current you. The future you will undoubtedly be a better writer and will fall harder in love with another piece, and you need to allow that person to exist. Which means gaining that mileage, being able to complete something and then moving on to the next. Completion is so important. It's why you hear some advice say learn with short stories. They're not telling you to write short until you feel like you can start writing a novel. The actual advice they're giving is learn how to complete stuff, because there are parts of writing that you pick up quicker when you're playing around with a complete draft. It shouldn't be just words for words sake, but quality mileage, and it should also be enjoyable, because at the end of the day, writing is supposed to be fun. Which kind of leads me into part 4 of 4, fun. Have fun or I will find you. But fun in the form of experimentation. Become a writing scientist. Experiment with all different styles. Play with diction, POV, write rigid and avant-garde. Turn the sky into a character. Write a non-linear story. And chances are you never put out any of this. It kind of goes back to the idea of a scribble book. You start to figure out quickly what you're good at, and more importantly, you hone in on what you like. You read a lot of romance and you think, oh, I should write a romance, when you might have way more fun writing a thriller instead, but you don't know that because you've never tried, and then you slowly kind of end up hating your writing because you keep trying to pigeonhole yourself. It kind of happened to me. I really got into reading with sci-fi. Alex Rider and Cherub was my jam, and I grew into stuff like the Mitch Rapp series, and I tried writing sci-fi myself. Somehow it always ended up turning into world endings takes in an alternate universe, and the magic system had snuck itself in there at some points. It took me too long to realize that I was trying to write an epic fantasy, and that doesn't mean you won't ever come back to sci-fi, but the grass is definitely greener here for me. And I would have never found it out if I didn't allow myself the freedom and fun of experimentation. If I never allowed myself to let go of the idea of my novel. But I want to circle back to the beginning when I said this advice kind of depends on what type of writer you are. I kind of knew this before I started, but creating content has really shown me how many different writers there are from so many different walks of life, all writing for different reasons. And if you ask a lot of YouTubers, they'll usually tell you they have an ideal audience member they're creating for. And for me, that person is trying to go semi-pro at the very least, because it mirrors my own journey. I try to make allowances for all types of writers, but I always have that in the back of my mind. And same with this video, a friendly kick in the rear saying, hey, you're trying to do this professionally, and there are some things you should keep in mind, or at least are thinking about, for myself as well. But if you're a hobby writer who just likes to write, then just do that, dude. If you still found this advice helpful anyway, fantastic, but don't take my word as law. I am just a guy. Like I said in the beginning, these are the things I've discovered along my own writing journey, and it's completely understandable that they might not work for you. Writing is subjective, you do you. Check out the Patreon, that one is not negotiable, and barring anything else, just have fun with your writing. Okay, bye.